Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to another Ref Brandon and the Todd family YouTube video. Wherever you are, whatever you may be doing, thank you so much for making Ref Brandon and the Todd family a part of your day. We always greatly appreciate it. Tomorrow is week 0 in the world of college football, so I figured since tomorrow is week 0, I would get on here and run down some of the rule changes for the 2021 college football season. You know, if you follow college football or the NFL, there are rule changes that happen every single year. It's almost like the people that are in charge think if they don't change something, then everybody's going to think that they're not keeping themselves occupied during the off season, so they think they've got to change something every year. So we're going to run those down because I think some of them may affect some games in one way, shape, or form this year. But before I get into that, since we're on the subject of college football, let me say, if anybody knows more about this alliance than I do, please let me know. But I've waited all week long to bring it up because I can't make sense of it. So I'm going to tell you the two stories that I've heard. But supposedly the ACC and the Big Ten and the Pac-12 have formed an alliance. But from what I gather from all the articles that I've read, which is about, I'd say, 15 different articles from 15 different people or websites, they're not going to merge and become one major conference. They're just forming an alliance. And from what I gather, it sounds like they're forming an alliance so that when they play non-conference games, instead of playing non-conference games against, FCS schools or small FBS schools, their non-conference games will be against each other, which I guess is good in a way because, depending on who your non-conference game is against, it may strengthen your schedule a little bit. But at the same time, if that's the case, I don't know that if I like that or not, because as a Clemson fan, South Carolina is our rival. And even though South Carolina is pitiful, and it definitely brings down your strength of schedule a little bit playing a team as bad as the Gamecocks are, but I would still rather play South Carolina than I would play Indiana. Yeah, Indiana's a better team, but you need your rival. Same way with Georgia. I don't want the Georgia Tech rivalry to end, but it sounds like that's the direction that they're headed because I have not read one thing that said that they were actually going to merge and become a major conference. Because I even read one article where one of the ADs, I think it was the Big Ten, but don't quote me on that, said that they're going to try to start new rivalries. He never one time said they're becoming one major conference. So I think there's still going to be 3 separate conferences, especially when the Pac-12 came out and said they're not looking to expand. Well, if you merge with the ACC and the Big Ten, then you're expanding. So I don't think they're going to become a major conference. They're just going to make sure that their non-conference games are against each other. I just hope it doesn't end the actual rivalries. But just like the SEC adding Oklahoma and Texas, I didn't like that. I don't like this either. It's nothing against the Big Ten or nothing against the Pac-12. But if you know me personally, you know I'm a Clemson fan. I'm not an ACC fan. If the rest of the conference completely sucked, I wouldn't care. I'm a Clemson fan. What anybody else does not bother me or affect me in one way, shape, or form. I don't care if Florida State wins the national championship. If Clemson didn't win it, I don't care. So I'm not a fan of any particular conference, so don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I don't like the conference stuff at all. I'm a fan of a team, not a conference. But I like the rivalries. And a lot of times teams, rival is from another conference. And I don't want to see those go away. But now the stories that I've heard 2. One is, whether we like to admit it or not, the Big Ten is the most prestigious conference in America. It's just a fact. They've got the most money, and with all the sports combined, they've won the most championships. Those are facts. Can't deny them. So one article said the Big Ten was not going to let themselves get outdone by the SEC, so they're doing this, and they're going to play their non-conference games against the ACC and the Pac-12 so that the SEC can't play anybody good out of conference. So now, like if you follow Clemson, then you know Clemson played Georgia twice recently. They played Texas A&M twice. They played Auburn twice. Well, according to this article, those things will not happen now. If Clemson wants to schedule, a non-conference game, instead of it being somebody in the SEC, it'll be somebody from the Big Ten or somebody from the Pac-12. Another article I read said they're doing this trying to prolong the playoff because we know the college football playoff is supposed to start in a couple of years. But the rule, they said, was if you had 12 playoff teams, you were going to have, all the major Power 5 conferences. The winner of that conference would automatically get in. Plus, you'd get the winner that was the highest ranked team from the group of 5 conferences. And then you'd have the 6 wildcard teams. Well, now, if these 3 conferences do eventually come together as one, then all of a sudden you only have 2 or 3 major conferences. So either the playoff cannot expand, or it can only be 8 teams, not 12 teams, or you've got to prolong it even longer to try to, put out some new rules. So I don't really know which one is the truth. It's probably one of those things where the truth lies somewhere in the middle, because the Big Ten being the most prestigious conference, they probably don't want to be outdone by the SEC. That's probably true, but they also probably do want to prolong the playoff because I believe it's going to be the beginning of the end for college football, and the Big Ten and the Pac-12 may feel that way as well. I'm not sure. If you know more than I do, please feel free to let me know. But from what I've gathered, they're not going to merge as of yet and become one major conference. They're just going to form an alliance so that they play each other in non-conference games. If this happens, which you'll see more than likely eventually, is, most of these teams always have one game a year, no matter who you are. Everybody has one game a year, like, say, Georgia. They'll play, Mercer or Georgia Southern, Georgia State, something like that. More than likely, those games will go away. And then eventually, those teams will probably start playing their season in the spring. That way, they still get to play, but they won't be playing, during the regular season. Because let's face it, unless you're a true hardcore fan of one of those teams, which most of the time the only fans of those teams are people that either went to school there or know somebody went to school there. So if you're not playing one of the major FBS teams, there's no point in playing while they're playing because nobody's going to watch. So more than likely, these teams will start playing in the spring, and then when these major teams have their spring game, instead of their spring game being against each other, their spring game will be against Wofford or Florida Atlantic or somebody that's close to your team. That's probably what's going to end up happening. But on to the rule changes. The first one I mentioned about 2 months ago, I guess it's been now, but I wanted to bring it back up just in case you missed that video or you've forgotten about it. But it's the overtime rule. It used to be an overtime. Once the third overtime started, you had to start going for 2 after your touchdown. It was optional in the first 2 overtimes, but starting in the third overtime, you had to go for 2 after a touchdown. Well, this year, starting in the second overtime, you have to go for 2, and if both teams get it or neither team get it and there's a third overtime, starting in the third overtime, there will no longer be any possessions. So instead of taking over on your opponent's 25-yard line, it's immediately a 2-point conversion. So starting in the third overtime, it's just going to be alternating 2-point conversions until somebody wins the game. They're doing that, one, because a few fans complain about a game taking too long when it goes to 8 or 9 overtimes, but 2, it's also trying to help cut back on injuries because football is so dangerous. The more plays you're on the field, the better chance you have of getting hurt. And let's be honest, if you play for a team and it goes to the 7th or 8th overtime, if you're a major player on either side of the ball, you're going to be on the field every single play. Another rule change this year, which I understand, but then I don't understand, and I'm going to explain why I don't understand. That's faking injuries. Because if you follow college football, you know that 95% of teams now run the spread offense. So a lot of times the defense doesn't have time to substitute. So you have a lot of complaints now from fans thinking the opposing team faked an injury because anytime a defensive player goes to the ground, the game stops. Sometimes it's legit, and sometimes you wonder whether or not it's legit. But starting this year, if you think a team is faking an injury or injuries, you can send the video to the coordinator of officials, Steve Shaw. He reviews his findings and sends his findings to the athletic directors. That I understand. Here's the part I don't get. There's going to be no penalty. It makes absolutely no sense to send a video to Steve Shaw for him to review it and see if a team is indeed faking an injury if there's no penalty. So I get sending in the video if you think the team is faking an injury, but if there's no penalty, why waste your time sending the video to Steve Shaw, and why is Steve Shaw going to waste his time watching the video and then sending it to the ADs and saying, well, there's no penalty? That part I don't understand. And another rule change this year, the team area on the sideline is changing. And if you're not sure what that is, you probably don't see it a whole lot on TV. But if you ever go to a game, you'll notice right behind the actual out-of-bounds line is a white line that goes down both teams' sidelines. And the players are supposed to stay on that line or behind that line. Well, it used to go from the 25 to the 25. Well, then last year, to try to help the players get more spread out, they made it from the 15 to the 15. But now they've kind of come in the middle, and now they've gone from the 20 to the 20. So it was 25 to 25, then it was 15 to 15. Well, now it's 20 to 20. I don't think that's really going to make a difference, but it's a rule change, so I wanted to bring that up. But here comes the one that I think is going to affect some games this year, especially for the coaches that are very hyper and don't like to sit still. This year, coaches have to stay on the sideline. If a coach walks on the field at any time, for any reason, in any way, shape, or form, it's an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. Now, it doesn't say for injuries, but I'm assuming if one of your players gets injured and you walk on the field to check on them, that's perfectly fine. It doesn't say that, but I'm sure that's okay. All I know is they said this year the coaches have to stay on the sideline. So a lot of these coaches nowadays, especially the more hyper coaches, have what they call get-back guys. Because nowadays, all these teams running the spread, you have to call the plays, from the sidelines, moving your hands and being all gyrational. Well, now a lot of teams have the get-back guy that stands behind you and tries to keep you off the field. Well, these get-back guys may start getting a pay raise because now if the coach puts 1 foot on the field, supposedly, it's going to be a penalty. The way the rule reads, there's not going to be a lot of warnings about it because the rule's in place. You know the rule's in place. You're supposed to adjust to the rule. So supposedly there's not going to be a lot of warnings. So I'm just anxious to see how many games get affected by this, especially if a team has the ball late in the game and the offense is trying to make sure the play is right. If the quarterback or the running back comes to the sidelines to get the play from the coach, and he turns around and goes to walk off, if the coach forgot something or something wasn't clear, if that coach puts 1 foot on that field, it's going to be an unsportsmanlike penalty. So I think there will be some games affected by this rule, especially early in the season. I think by later in the season, you'll be fully adjusted to it. But if you're a hyper guy that always, runs up and down the sidelines and now all of a sudden you're supposed to stay on the sidelines, it's going to be hard to adjust right away. Another rule that is taking effect this year is for the video and audio board guys. The video and audio board lighting operators cannot create any distraction that obstructs play. If they do, that is an unsportsmanlike penalty. And that's going to be hard too, because a lot of these teams have video and audio board guys that have been running that stuff for years. So if you're a sound guy or a video guy in any way, and you're used to doing something, at a certain time or a certain point, and all of a sudden you can't do that, that's going to be hard to adjust to. But the way I read the rule, it sounds like it's only going to be a penalty if the opposing team complains about it. If not, it's not a big deal. The referees don't care. It's just to make sure the opposing team doesn't care. So if the video and audio board operators create any distraction that obstructs play and the opposing team complains about it, that is an unsportsmanlike penalty. And the last one that I believe is going to affect some games is taunting is now an unsportsmanlike penalty. I don't think they're taken away from the actual excitement of playing the game. And I know some people are going to say, man, you can't celebrate. That's not what they're saying. There's a difference in celebrating and taunting. As long as you stand up and you celebrate with your team, that's okay. Taunting is something that is directed towards the opposing sidelines or the opposing team or the opposing fans. So now as a player, you just got to make sure that you're celebrating and you're not doing anything that is directed towards the opposing team in any way, shape, form, fashion. Otherwise, that will be a penalty. So that is some of the college football rule changes as we head into the 2021 season. If you have any thoughts on them, please let me know. Let's go ahead and get our dad joke of the day in here. Whoever stole my set of highlighters, I will find you. Mark my words. And that wraps it up for today's Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Until next time, it's Ref Brandon saying, just like in pro wrestling, life can be over by the count of 3. Tell your friends and family how much you love them. Bye.